We are very, very honored here to be joined once again on the show by Briahna Joy Gray, who is the host of the Bad Faith podcast, among other superlatives I could list. Briahna, as always, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me back. And I feel like I need to announce my campaign for president to get my breakthrough news bump right off the bat.
Yeah.
I like that.
You're
I like that.
welcome.
I kid.
Well, look, we might come back to you in 2028, given how things are looking now. But
Yeah.
so today, Representative Al Green was censured in Congress. 10 Democrats voted for the censure. Of course, if you didn't see the speech, he got up and yelled at Trump, "You do not have a mandate to cut Medicaid," and was removed from the premises. I guess what I want to ask you here, Briahna, is, not only the 10 Democrats who voted to censure him, but the fact that the Democratic leadership, I guess, had told people, don't protest at all, don't shout, don't say anything, don't stand up, don't walk out. And they had like those lame signs and like the pink outfits. I don't even know it. Maybe I'll just leave it there, but it just seems like, how could you possibly even claim to be in opposition in this kind of reality?
It's interesting. Look, in a world where there was a more robust substantive opposition, I wouldn't be so hard at some of these more symbolic efforts. But the fact is that these symbolic efforts are the extent of what is being done, point blank, period. And then finding out that it's the Democratic Party who actually told folks not to do more. I just literally just wrapped an interview with Jamal Bowman where he reported the same, that his former colleagues have been told to be like minimalistic about their protest, and it is really dispiriting. It is a bizarro world as a leftist to be seeing so many centrist Dems who normally carry water for the Democratic Party like they're all Aquariuses. They're all water bearers, no matter what, flipping and saying, actually, I expect there to be something more, for you to have been crying about incoming fascism for all of these years, and to see the manifestation of a second Trump presidency being, frankly, I think a lot worse than what some people might have anticipated. And all you can do is wave a bingo paddle and wear pink. And then Democrats, having 10 Democrats coming over to join the censure of a colleague who did only what, who was it, Marjorie Taylor Greene did a few years ago, and shouting, "You're lying," at Joe Biden. When, by the way, ironically, at that time, she was saying that he was lying about Republicans wanting to cut Social Security, which is, of course, what Donald Trump is doing right now. It's like levels of irony and frustration. And I think everyone's waiting for someone to meet the moment.
Brianna, it reminds me of, when we think about meeting the moment, James Carville, longtime Democratic operative and advisor, recently made headlines because he said the Democrats should just roll over and play dead. This is always what Democrats do when there's a Republican in charge. They just sit back and they pretend to be an opposition party in these really like silly, semi-theatrical, like boring ways. But then I see, like, who are they trying to promote as the possible saviors? I've seen them try to promote Chris Murphy, who is like as bland as it gets and just like another centrist Democrat. And then I think, who was it who gave like a speech after the Trump's speech? I think it was
Elise Slotkin.
Slotkin.
Oh, yeah.
Another really bland, like, what does she call herself? Like a national security Democrat, like another one of
She's
those.
CIA.
I mean, yeah. It's just okay. So, like, what's going on here? Part of me is like, oh, they're just really dumb and they don't know how to be opposition. But the more realistic side of me is like, Democrats can't be opposition when at the end of the day they're funded by a different version of the same people who fund the Republicans. No.
They know. They know. There was a choice to pick Slotkin. And the fact that Bernie Sanders got up and gave his own address that got, millions of views on the internet, even though it wasn't being pushed by, the corporate TV channels the way that Slotkin's official response was, that Bernie was sitting right there. They know he's the most popular person Democrat in Congress. They know how effective he is. They know how many people are turning out for these oligarchy town halls he's having across the country in red districts, and they still chose Slotkin. They know what they're doing. Here's the story that I pulled from my interview with Bowman that I didn't actually get around to. I'm sure everybody's seen it, but Politico covered the fact that there was this moderate Democrat consultants that got together in early February to discuss like plans for what's coming up next. And their to do agenda items, what they resolved to do was to embrace patriotism, community, and traditional American imagery. So put more flags on things, I guess. That the Democrats should ban far left candidate questionnaires and refuse to participate in forums that create ideological purity tests. And this was the kicker, move away from the dominance of small dollar donors whose preferences may not align with the broader electorate. Babes, the small dollar donors are the broader electorate. The preferences you don't want them to align with are the corporate donors who I'm sure funded this oligarchy fest that was held in Loudoun County, Virginia, like the wealthiest county in the entire country, where the lobbyists have settled, because that's whose agenda is being pushed. And so, like, this is my frustration. I'm a little hot under the collar because it just had a useful but somewhat tense back and forth with Jamal Bowman about this question of when are squad members, when are left-ranked Democrats going to acknowledge that the Democratic Party quite literally pushed you out and is never going to be a vehicle for real resistance. I know it's tough. I know it's hard. We were all raised, or many of us were raised to believe that the Democratic Party was the good guy. I mean, my mom has always been a Green Party voter, but that's neither here nor there. But we were raised to believe that of the two factions, at least, they were the ones that were at least fighting for us. And I think we're going through this period of dissonance where even like centrist, moderate Dems are realizing, like, yeah, I agree with what the Democratic Party says they want to do, and I even agree with this Loudoun County agenda, but they're not even doing it. They're not even doing anything at all. The order is to stand down and stand by, to quote Donald Trump, and during a time where there's supposed to be exigency.
No, I think it's an important issue. Wow, Loudoun County, Northern Virginia. Rania, your people. But
Fairfax. I'm from Fairfax.
Yeah, so much better.
I'm distancing myself.
I understand, as you should. I think it's actually a really important point, Briahna, because it just feels like everything has to start somewhere, and it feels like people who just want something to just fall from the sky. Like it would be great if we had a more progressive third-party alternative. And if we go back in history, and that's the thing that drives me crazy, and I'm really looking forward to, your interview with Jamal Bowman, is like when you go back in history, if you just like name people, and if I was like, well, Frederick Douglass was supporter of a quote unquote third party, and list random names, you know what I'm saying? In that regard, everyone's like, oh yeah, they were so great, and they were so trailblazing, and they were so that. Well, should we start a third party now of workers and, the Black community and the immigrant communities and start fighting back? Well, no, we can't do that now. And it just feels like at a certain point, like, people have to recognize the history in front of us. Like, if somebody doesn't start, the thing will never start.
And it is hard. It's going to be an uphill battle. There's going to be a lot of losses, but like the sooner we start, the sooner we can be successful. And by the way, the Republican Party was the third party. The Republican Party is the success story of what happened when the existing duopoly didn't meet the political moment on a polarizing issue that was at the time abolition. What happened? No one was willing to stand up and be full-throatedly an advocate for a coalition that represented a significant portion of the population. What happened? A new party was born. We have that moment right now in Gaza, particularly in the lead up to the election. I mean, now you have this weird diffuse media coverage of the thing where it's like the Democrats talk about it only to use as a cudgel against the left. Like, oh, look at these bad things that are happening. Somehow this is your fault, even though my candidates fully backed over a year of this horror show. But particularly when it was so front of mind in the lead up to the election, there was such an enormous opportunity to have a real primary and a campaign that listened to the fact that recent polling shows that 29% of people who voted for Biden in 2020 and didn't vote for him in 2024 expressly did so on the issue of Gaza. A candidate who actually spoke in economic class material terms the way that Bernie did in his response to the State of the Union. I mean, look, I want to caveat this by saying I'm deeply frustrated that Bernie is willing to use his great talents to sheep herd people back into the Democratic Party. But in terms of what he actually said and the impact of it and what people need to hear, his State of the Union response was almost, with the exception of the Ukraine part, pitch perfect, right? And he could have been that person, or someone else could have been that kind of a voice that would have been so attractive and could have led us off of the precipice of Donald Trump that we're all looking down into right now. And there was a complete unwillingness to do so, because at the end of the day, the more important thing is maintaining the status quo, including the national security, military-industrial complex status quo.
Well, to what you're saying, I mean, so one of the things that someone like Bernie Sanders will repeatedly talk about, but the rest of the Democratic Party won't, is, I mean, Trump is not. It's not that hard to criticize his agenda, because a lot of what he's doing is incredibly unpopular. Trump's not talking about it, but he's literally just like gutting programs that people rely on. He's destroying Medicaid. He's preparing to destroy Medicare, destroy Social Security. He's got Elon Musk like taking a hatchet to government funding for really important things in the country that the majority of Americans rely on or will eventually rely on. And it's an easy thing to attack. And Democrats aren't even doing that. So like Trump's not talking about it. Yeah.
Because they invented these people. Like the Democrats are chagrined, not because Elon Musk is running the government. It's because they empowered Elon Musk. They were in power when he was getting his big government grants and made him a billionaire and made him basically a mini defense contractor on whom the American national security apparatus relies for his surveillance technology and the satellites and whatnot. And they just wanted him to be on their team. Elon, you're supposed to be donating to me. Zuckerberg was supposed to be donating to me. All of these billionaires, the only problem is that they're switching teams. Bill Ackman, all of them are switching teams. That's their complaint. And so when you are just going through that list of all of the things that they're doing to loot the government, that's spot on. But also I think the part that Bernie connects it to that they're unwilling to do is to say, not only are they doing all these terrible things, but they're doing it to enrich the elites. Democrats don't want to offend the elite, so they tend to leave that part off. But that's what makes the story hang and sound true. Not just Democrats framing these people as like amorphously evil, but like these are billionaires who literally use their resources to buy the president of the United States so that they can loot the treasury and enrich themselves. When Bernie Sanders was talking about how if the tax cuts are implemented, they will overwhelmingly benefit the wealthy while the taxes on working people go up. When he says not a single word was said in that speech about how your grocery prices are going to go down. And in fact, now we're getting articles in like I think it was the Washington Post, correct me if I'm wrong, that talking about, well, it was kind of crazy that eggs were ever cheap, actually. They're so fragile. They're so delicate. Did you see that one? I mean, this is the real, this is what's happening.
Oh my God.
You know,
eggs are fragile.
They're so fragile. How did we ever transport them so cheaply anyway? So like this is Bernie is able to close the loop because he doesn't just give you a villain, he gives you motive, and he shows you specifically how it's going to hurt you. When he said the thing, this I just watched this all this morning. I've been procrastinating it, so excuse me, it's all very front of mind for me. But when he said the thing about how like, okay, Elon's firing government workers, we've seen that covered a bunch. Fine. But Bernie takes it a step further. Rhetorically, this is, I think, very smart. He says Elon's firing these government workers and saying no one's entitled to a job and we shouldn't feel bad for them. Okay, well, you might not be a government worker and maybe you think that this is immaterial. But the cavalier attitude that he's bringing to this issue, what's going to happen when AI and Elon Musk decide to get rid of your job? Who's going to pay your mortgage? What's going to happen to you? Who's going to defend you when he finally comes for you? We all know that AI is coming. And I was like, ooh, spooky. Yeah, good point, Bernie. So it is his existence is useful because rhetorically he's demonstrating the path in a way that even centrists, I think, can't ignore, and they're giving him plaudits for. But the unwillingness of the Democratic Party to ape what he's saying and to actually mean it speaks volumes about who they are and should be used by the left as an example of exactly why the Democratic Party isn't the path forward.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think it was the Washington Post with the eggs. Just a shocking thing. Also, Trump saying,
editorially, they can only talk about the free market. What did Bezos say? They're going to talk about the free market and personal freedom. So you have the personal freedom to no longer get the cheap, easy source of protein that eggs once were.
It's amazing. A tough time for farmers. It was also amazing. Trump said, saying the farmers need to bear with me because they bared with me the last time when at the end of his term, the farm bankruptcies were the highest they've been in 9 years. But that's a whole separate story for a whole separate time. Don't get me started on agriculture. But no, I think very well taken points, very important issues. Very excited to see your upcoming interview with Jamal Bowman, as I'm always excited to see everything on the Bad Faith podcast. And you, of course, are the host of that podcast, Briahna Joy Gray. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you for having me. And people should go check out Rania's interview with him from the end of last year, which I watched this morning as well, and was really terrific. And I tried not to retrod any of that territory because you were so good. So think of this as Rania's interview part 2.
It's the 1-2 punch,
The 1-2